We continue now at the top of Daf Chav Gimel Amud Beis in Meseches Gittin. This is Gittin Daf 23b. On the previous summer, they asked Rabbi Yami, can an Eved be a Shliach L'Holacha or a Shliach L'Kabbalah for a get? And Rabbi Yami answered, from the fact that our Mishnah mentions an Oved Kochavim is disqualified, Mechlal de Eved kosher. That seems to imply that an Eved is kosher. Rashi says, Mechlal de Eved kosher, v'chiechi de kosher la'avo, li'o Shliach l'Zgarish, kach kosher L'Kabbalah. Just like an Eved is allowed to be a Shliach to deliver a get, to be a Shliach Holacha or Shliach Avo, so too he's able to be a Shliach L'Kabbalah to receive the get. Li'o Shliach l'Zgarish, to be a Shliach to receive the get for the divorce on behalf of the woman. She'ein chilak tam beineim. The point is, there's no difference in terms of what kind of shliach. The question, as Rashi said on the previous summit, was in general, could the Eved be a shliach? And the implication over here is that an Eved could be a shliach. And the Gemara continues, Amar Ravasi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Ravasi says that Rabbi Yochanan says, Ein ha'eved nasa shliach l'kavel get l'isha miad bala l'fisha eino b'toras gittin v'kiddushin. An Eved is not able to become a shliach, to receive a get from her husband, to receive a get isha on behalf of a wife or from her husband, because he's not part of the laws of gittin and kiddushin. And the Gemara says, Ma'askif lo Rebbe Elazar. Rebbe Elazar asked on this. Taima b'milsa delesi. The reason that you're giving is because he's not part of Gittin and Kiddushin. He's not part of these issues. Ha b'milsa de'isei kosher. But let's say it would be something which he is relevant in. Apparently he'd be kosher to be a shliach. Va'ovid kochavim v'hakusi. But what about an ovid kochav mananju and a kusi? The isnu b'toras truma denafshayu. They are part of the halachas of truma in general when it's their own truma. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, ovid kochavim v'hakusi shatarmu mishalohem trumasam truma. If a nanju or a kusi, if they take off truma from their own property, that truma is considered truma. Utanani, yet we learned in the Mishnah, Ovid kochavim shataram shal Yisrael. If an ovid kochavim takes truma off a Yisrael's produce, afilu bershus, even if he has permission, ain truma, so truma, that's not considered a good truma. My time, and what's the reason? La mishum dechsiv gamatem. Isn't it because the pasuk says gamatem, and we understand that to mean ma'atem Yisrael. Just like you are Jewish, af shluchachem Yisrael, so too your shliach has to be Jewish, and so therefore we see a general halacha that an ovid kochavim is not able to be a shliach. So it's not because the ovid kochavim is not in the Torah's Gittin v'Kiddushin, or let's say by the Eved, it's not because the Eved is not part of the Torah's Gittin v'Kiddushin. It should be a general halacha that just like you are Yisrael, af shluchachem Yisrael. And the Gemara answers, no, Amri Devei Rabbi Yanai, they said in the Shiva of Rabbi Yanai, lo, no. Ma'atem b'nei bris, what it really means is just like you are b'nei bris, af shluchachem b'nei bris, so too your shluchim need to be b'nei bris, meaning to say, those who do not have a bris are excluded. So the Ovid Kochavim is excluded, but the Eved is not necessarily excluded. And Rashi explains, let's say it would be relevant to the Eved, so apparently the Eved would be able to be a Shliach, said the Gemara. Could go in Truma, Sha'asr le'Eved lechol tevel, for example, Truma. An Eved's not allowed to eat tevel, v'im yesh lo tevel, shenitan lo amanashein l'rabo rishasbo, ma'afresh Truma heimenu. Let's say an Eved has produce, and let's say it's produce that's exclusively his, so he separates Truma from that, or Truma, so Truma that's considered a good Truma. The Eved kiisha b'chol mitzvahs, because an Eved is like a woman when it comes to mitzvahs. V'tei monami, dekasha li'o shliach litrum, and according to that, we should say that the Eved is kosher to be a shliach in terms of truma. And then Gemara continued, Shatarmu shalahen trumas and truma. We said by an ovid kochavim, if they take truma off their own produce, that is considered a good truma va'asura lazarim. It's asur to non kohanim. The savar ein kinyan lovid kochavim beretz Yisrael lafkia mikdushas meiser, because this Tana holds that there is no kinyan for a non-Jew in Eretz Yisrael to take it away from the kedusha, from the chiyuvim of meiser, and so there is a chiyuv of truma and meiser when it comes to the property of the non-Jew. V'hekdash ovid kochavim hekdash, and when an ovid kochavim makes something sanctified, it's sanctified. Kidi alfinan meish ish l'rabas is over kochavim shenodrim nedarim nedavos ki Yisrael. Like we learn out from the pasuk that again a non-Jew is able to bring nedarim and nedavos just like a Jew, and that's why an over kochavim, if he takes off truma, it is an effective truma. But afilu b'reshusa shel Yisrael shaso shliach ain't truma so truma. But when it comes to the over kochavim being a shliach of the Yisrael to take off truma, the truma is not a good truma. My time ain't a truma, and what's the reason why the over kochavim can't be a shliach for truma? La mishum the shlichus the truma dechsiv kein torimu gamatem, because the shlichus of truma is learned out from the pasuk gamatem. V'darshinan midamatzi lemechtav atem, because of gamatem, from the fact that could have just said atem and instead it says gamatem, l'rabo shluchachem, that comes to include shlichus. V'eske shliach l'shalcho, and the shliach is compared to the one who sent him. B'haikra, in this pasuk l'meimar to say t'ma'atem b'nei Yisrael af shluchachem b'nei Yisrael, that a shliach has to be b'nei Yisrael. Omehai miyuta ikol l'mu'utei nami le'eved. Now, if we're excluding a non-Jew because it's not Yisrael, so an Eved is also should be excluded because he's not Yisrael. Shatar v'shal Yisrael b'rishus, if an Eved takes off truma from a Yisrael's produce with rishus as a shliach, it should not be effective. And the Gemara then says, lo no ma'atem b'nei bris. Really, the exclusion is that a shliach has to be a ben bris, muhulim uvo bebris mitzvahs, meaning having a bris milah and being part of the covenant of the mitzvahs. Af shluchachem b'nei bris lafuke over kochavim. Again, the shliach has to be a b'nei bris that excludes over kochavim. Avol eved ben brisu, but an eved is considered a ben bris. Tichsiv mechotev etzecha v'gomer, as it says in the pasuk, and therefore an eved is not excluded from shlichus, even though an oved kochavim is. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Chia bar Abba says that Rabbi Yochanan says, Ein ha'eved nasa shliach lekabel gerisha miyad bala. An eved is not able to become a shliach to receive a gerisha from the woman's husband, lefi she'eino b'toras gittin v'kiddushin, because he's not part of the laws of gittin and kiddushin, as we said above. V'ava pisha shaninu, and even though we learned in a brais in Meseches Tzmura, harei at shivchu v'aldech ben chorin. Let's say a person says to his maidservant, you will remain a shivcha, but your unborn child is going to be free. Em haisa ubra zachzalo, so if she's pregnant, she can be zoch in the shtar shichur on behalf of her unborn child. And the Gemara asks, Mayim haisa ubra zachzalo. What is this line over here that if she's pregnant, she can be zocha in the shtar shichur for her unborn child? What does that have to do with the first halacha that an eved is not allowed to be a shliach lekabbalah for a gerisha? And the Gemara says, Ki yasser Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda, Rabbi Yochanan. When Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda came, he said that Rabbi Yochanan said, Tarti Amar. This was actually just two separate statements of Rabbi Yochanan. Nirim devarim she'eved mekabel get lechaveru miyad rabo shel chaveru. What we're saying is as follows. It seems to be correct that an eved is able to accept a shtar shichur for his friend from the master of his friend. Meaning, if you have an eved and they're not two avodim from the same master, you have an eved from a different master. So the master number one can give the eved a shtar shichur on behalf of his own eved, as long as the eved he's giving the shtar shichur to is not his own eved. Avolo miyad rabo shelo. He can't take it for his friend from his own master. In other words, an eved is not allowed to take a shtar shichur from his own master on behalf of his friend. Now, if a person is going to whisper to you and say that's not true, because there's a halacha that says that let's say she's pregnant, she can be zoch on behalf of the unborn child. So here you have a situation where she's accepting a shtar shichur from her own master on behalf of a different eved, meaning on behalf of the unborn child. And so you see it's not true. You see even miyad rabo shelo, an eved is able to accept the shtar shichur on behalf of another eved. But the Gemara says, Em or lo, tell him, if you're going to bring that as a proof, it's not a proof. Say as follows, Shnei Gedolei Hador, Pershu es Hadavar, there were two Gedolei Hador that explained that halacha about the pregnant shivcha. Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, Rabbi Zera rather, Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, Rabbi Zera and Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak, they explain this halacha. Chad Amar, one of them says, Hamani Rebbe, who is this line over here that says in the Braisa that the shivcha is able to accept it on behalf of her unborn child? It's Rebbe. The Amar HaMeshachar Chatzi Avdo Kana. Rebbe holds that if a person frees half of his slave, that's a good kinyan. You can free half of the eved. V'chadamar, the other one says, my time with the Rebbe, what's the reason of Rebbe behind this case? Kasavar, he holds, Uber Yerachimohu, that the Uber, the unborn child, is actually just considered like the thigh of its mother. And therefore, if she accepts the shtar shichur on behalf of the Uber, it's just like accepting it on behalf of one of her limbs. And we hold that you are able to free just part of the eved, one of her limbs. And therefore, that's why in this situation, it's not that she's a shliach accepting it for unborn child. Really, she's accepting it for herself, meaning for part of herself, and it's possible to be meshachrer chatzi avdo. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, even the women who are not believed to say that her husband, meaning this wife's husband, died, they wouldn't be believed because it's in general, these women are said to hate the wife. But even those women, they are believed to deliver her get. Even though there's reason to suspect that they hate this wife, they're believed to deliver her get. Who are these women that probably hate her? Chamosa, her mother-in-law, Bas Chamosa, the daughter of her mother-in-law, Bitzarasa, her co-wife, her rival wife, V'yavemta, her sister-in-law, Uvas Bala, and the daughter of her husband, her stepdaughter. All of those individuals have reason to hate her, and still they're believed to deliver her get, even though they would not be believed to testify that her husband died, because if they testify her husband died, they might be lying in order to mess her up. And the Mishnah continues, Ma bein get lemisa. What's the difference between get and misa? Why is it that they're not trusted in terms of the death of her husband, but they are trusted to bring the get from her husband? And the Gemara says to that, Shaksav mochiach. By get isha, you have a written document that supports what they're saying, and so there's more reason to believe them. And the Mishnah continues, Ha'isha atzma mevias gita, the wife herself can deliver her own get, uvilvad she'tzrich lomer b'fanei nechtav, b'fanei nechtam. But she has to say, b'fanei nechtav, u'b'fanei nechtam. And Rashi explains, Chamoso bas Chamoso bekula mefarish b'Yevamis. All of these various women, it's explained in Yevamis, the Sanyan law, that they hate her. Umechavnas l'kalkal, they're trying to mess her up. Therefore, they're not trusted to testify that her husband died. They might be lying just to mess her up. Yevimta, who's Yevimta, her sister-in-law, that's Eishes Achi Bala, that's the wife of the brother of her husband. Sono Sav Yerei Mimeni. She hates her, she's afraid of her. Shema Yamas Echad Mishnei Baalei. And why does she hate her? Because maybe one of the husbands will die below Bun without children. V'yutzara Zulazu, and then they're going to become rival wives to one another. Uma bein get lemisa. What is the difference between get and misa? Da misa lo mehemnin, v'aget mehemnin. That in terms of the death of her husband, they're not believed, but in terms of a get isha from her husband, they are believed. And again, the Mishnah said the difference is the ksav is mochiach. And the Gemara says, V'atani, but we learned in a brisa, Keshem she'ein ne'emonos lomar meisbala, just like these women are not believed to say her husband died, Kach ein ne'emonos lahavi gita, so too they're not believed to deliver her get, the exact opposite of what our Mishnah said. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Yosef says, Lokash, it's not difficult, Kan Ba'aretz, Kan B'chutz La'aretz. In one case, we're talking about in Eretz Yisrael, in one case, we're talking about in Chutz La'aretz. Ba'aretz, the lav adibura didak kasamchin and mehem. In Eretz Yisrael, where we're not relying on any statement of the woman, because they don't have to say Fanei Nechtam, so there she's believed to deliver the get. But Chutz La'aretz, the adibura didak kasamchin and lo mehem, but in Chutz La'aretz, we're relying on her statement of Fanei Nechtam, and these people, we can't trust them, so in the situation of Chutz La'aretz, these women are not believed. Amar le Abayas said to Rav Yosef, Adrab, on the contrary, Ifcham Istaber, the exact opposite is more logical. Ba'aretz in Eretz Yisrael, the Yasi Balma Aram Mishkachinan Be, where if the husband would come protest, we would pay attention, because nobody said B'fanei Nechtam. There was no testimony that was certifying the shtar, that was verifying the shtar, so the husband can mess everything up. So there, the Ikol Amemar L'Kalkula Kamechavna, there we can say that really she's delivering it on purpose just to mess her up. So Lo Mehemna, so she shouldn't be believed. But in Chutz La'aretz, the Yasi Balma Lo Mishkachinan Be, where if the husband comes in protest, we don't pay attention to him any longer, because we have a testimony of B'fanei Nechtam. So in that case, Mehemna, in that case, she should be believed, because there's really no chance that she's going to mess this woman up anyways, and so we should believe her. Rashi says, Ba'aretz she'ein tzricha lomer B'fanei Nechtav. Again, in Eretz Yisrael, there's no need to say B'fanei Nechtav. The Yossi Baal Ma'ar, but he said, but if the husband comes in protest, V'yamar lo kasavtiv, and he says, I didn't write it, Mashkechinan Be. So in Eretz Yisrael, we actually pay attention to the husband's protest, Sharei lo neskayim bebezdin, because it wasn't yet certified in Bezdin. So you could say in Eretz Yisrael, on the contrary, these particular women are trying to mess her up in this fashion. But in Chutz La'aretz, where they're going to be saying B'fanei Nechtav, and that's a certification, and there's no more concern for protest, and if he does protest, he's not believed anyway. So on the contrary, in Chutz La'aretz, she's not going to get messed up, and therefore we should trust these women. And the Gemara continues, Tanya Kavase de Abai. We have a brisa that supports Abaya's logic, that actually in Chutz La'aretz is where we trust these women. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Omer Mishum Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, in the name of Rabbi Akiva, Isha ne'emenes lavi gita mikal v'chomer. A woman is believed, the wife is believed to bring her get from the following kal v'chomer. Umanoshim shamru chacham ein ne'emonos lomar meis bala ne'emonos lavi gita. If these other women, where the chacham say they're not trusted to say that her husband died, but they are believed to deliver her get, so he, by the wife herself, shene'emenes lomar meis bala, that she's believed to say that her own husband died, Eino din shene'emenes lavi gita, isn't it true that she's able to deliver her get? And as we will continue on the next Amud, clearly this is talking about the statement saying B'fanei Nechtav or B'fanei Nechtam, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chav Daled Amud Aleph.